Imagine you just looked your boss right in the eye and admitted you lied to them about being violently ill.
Yeah, just completely made it up.
Exactly. Made it up so you could just, go spend the afternoon at the beach. And instead of firing you on the spot, they laugh.
Which is wild, because in most of the corporate world, I mean, that is a one-way ticket to the unemployment line.
Oh, absolutely. But in Australia, it's practically a cultural institution.
Right. And it completely subverts our standard expectations of, professional behavior. Because we're so conditioned to view workplace rules through this really rigid lens. Like, you follow the rules, you use proper vocabulary, and you maintain the hierarchy at all costs.
Right. You never break character at work. Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a super fun, culturally rich breakdown of 7 Australian slang terms that, honestly, the rest of the world probably needs to adopt right now.
Yeah, it would definitely lower our collective blood pressure.
For sure. But our mission today isn't just to hand you, the listener, a novelty dictionary so you can sound like a tourist. We're going to really look under the hood of these phrases to understand the linguistic psychology at play here.
Because there's so much going on beneath the surface.
Exactly. We're talking about how a culture famous for its picturesque beaches and, let's be real, terrifying wildlife, uses these shortened, cheeky phrases to completely dismantle social anxiety. It neutralizes authority, and it makes everyday human connection vastly more approachable. Okay, let's unpack this.
So the best place to observe these linguistic mechanics in action is, well, at the very beginning of an interaction.
Right, the greeting.
Yeah, before you can understand how a society works or plays, you really have to look at how they manage the initial friction of 2 human beings colliding in a social space.
Think about the last time a passing acquaintance or, like, a cashier asked you, "How are you?"
Oh, the absolute worst.
Right. You probably had a micro panic attack trying to figure out how much truth you're actually supposed to tell them. Like, do you mention that your car wouldn't start this morning and your dog threw up on the rug?
Usually no.
No, you just offer the standard hollow fine thanks. It creates this immediate social friction because it's a loaded question. But the Australian alternative completely bypasses that trap with a very simple, "How you going?"
And what's fascinating here is the functional utility of that phrase, "how you going," acts as, well, linguistic WD-40.
I love that. Linguistic WD-40.
Right. It just smooths everything out. It's completely decoupled from any serious inquiry about your actual mental or physical state. It's used indiscriminately. I mean, use it with your closest friends, the barista, or just a complete stranger on the street.
So is it essentially the Aussie equivalent of the American passing nod and like a quick, "What's up?"
Exactly. Where listing your actual problems would be a massive social faux pas.
Right. You aren't opening a door to your personal life. You are just acknowledging the other person's existence in a way that, removes the pressure to perform a whole summary of your day.
And by softening the intent of the question, the culture immediately lowers the stakes of the interaction. You're simply being acknowledged in a warm, unburdensome way. It sets this incredibly relaxed baseline of approachability.
And once that low-pressure baseline is established, it completely paves the way for a deeper kind of interaction. Which brings us to the concept of having a yarn.
Ah, yes, having a yarn. And just to clarify, the source notes, this has absolutely nothing to do with a physical ball of yarn.
Good clarification. Yeah, in a hyper-connected, deeply transactional world where every single conversation feels like networking.
Or just trying to get to a point as fast as possible.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Having a yarn is the behavioral opposite of that. It literally means chatting or sharing lengthy stories in this entirely unhurried way.
Notice the temporal mechanics at play there. The defining characteristic of a yarn is the deliberate suspension of time.
Wait, say more about that.
Well, you aren't exchanging information to reach a conclusion or, make a business decision. The exchange of the stories itself is the objective.
It's the conversational equivalent of stepping off a treadmill. Like sitting on a porch with a cup of coffee where the clock just completely doesn't matter.
That's a great way to put it.
If you ask someone where they were all afternoon and they say, "Oh, I was just having a yarn with the neighbors," it implies an immunity to the clock. It actively subverts the modern hustle culture that tells us every interaction needs to be an elevator pitch.
It enforces a slowing down. When a culture embeds a specific phrase for, talking without a destination, it heavily signals that they prize genuine, unpretentious presence over pure efficiency.
But, okay, this extreme emphasis on relaxation creates a bit of a paradox, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, if everyone is prioritizing low-stakes greetings and spending their afternoons just having a yarn, how does a society actually get anything built? I mean, the roads need paving. The massive agricultural sectors need to run. How does a culture globally renowned for being laid back handle actual suffering and grueling, serious work?
And that tension is exactly where the language gets highly pragmatic. Because the laid-back nature doesn't equate to laziness. It just means they apply a totally different psychological lens to the concept of effort. The vocabulary adapts to accommodate intense labor, which is captured brilliantly by the term hard yaka.
Hard yaka. I mean, even the phonetics of it, those really hard K sounds, it physically feels like striking an anvil.
It does. It describes truly tough, strenuous work.
Mhm.
And that applies to physical labor, like painting a fence in the blistering hot sun.
Or shearing sheep.
Exactly. But it also applies to a long, challenging day at the office. It conveys this no-nonsense determination to just push through exhaustion with a very practical attitude.
Wait, hold on. I need to push back on this a bit. If I'm just sitting at my laptop, right, in an air-conditioned room, wrestling with a massive spreadsheet all day, does an Aussie really consider that hard yaka? Or is it strictly for outdoor manual labor?
No, the source specifically includes a challenging project or a long day at the office in its definition.
Okay, but doesn't that kind of romanticize corporate suffering? Like, it sounds a bit like corporate propaganda to get employees to accept burnout by branding it as a tough, culturally approved badge of honor.
See, that is a very American hyper-capitalist way to read it.
Really?
Yeah, in the Australian context, the phrase actually serves as an equalizer rather than a tool for exploitation. It democratizes effort.
Yeah.
The CEO grinding through a brutal merger and the bricklayer working in 40-degree heat are both just doing hard yaka.
Oh, I see. So it strips away the prestige and reduces everything to the raw human effort required.
Exactly. It removes the elitism from white-collar work.
That's actually really profound, and the way that effort is rewarded culturally is equally fascinating because it avoids putting anyone on a pedestal.
Right, because when you survive that hard yaka, you don't get some formal, glowing commendation. You get a cheerful, simple, good chin.
Good on you. Short for good on you. Now, the source makes a very crucial distinction here. This should not be confused with telling someone an outfit looks good on you.
Yeah, very different context.
This is a warm expression used to praise someone for a job well done or an everyday achievement, like running a marathon or, surviving a crazy work week.
And this ties directly into a sociological concept known as tall poppy syndrome, which is deeply ingrained in Australian and New Zealand culture.
Right, the idea that the poppies that grow higher than the rest of the field get their heads cut off.
Precisely. There is this profound cultural allergy to arrogance, boasting, or elevating oneself above the community. So if someone successfully closes a massive deal at work, throwing them a grand formal celebration might actually make them super uncomfortable.
Because it risks making them a tall poppy.
Exactly. So good on ya acts as a leveling mechanism. It's a warm, supportive validation of the achievement, but it's deliberately unpretentious. It praises the effort while keeping the individual firmly grounded within the pack.
It's essentially a verbal high five.
Yes.
It cuts out the total awkwardness of a pompous congratulatory speech, but you don't lose any of the sincerity. It delivers the warmth, acknowledges the hard yaka, and immediately diffuses any potential ego.
If we look closely at how those two terms interact, we see a society that deeply respects grueling effort, but aggressively polices how that effort is celebrated.
But inevitably, the hard yaka gets to be too much, right? I mean, human beings can only take so much grinding, leveled praise or not.
Which is completely fair.
And this is where the language reveals its escape valves. Because Australians never take themselves too seriously, their slang features these built-in, cheeky escape valves for when you just genuinely need a break.
Which brings us to the most infamous of these playful rebellions. Chucking a sickie.
Okay, let's talk about the reality of this. Chucking a sickie is the Australian way of playing hooky. Calling in sick to work or school when you aren't actually ill, usually to rest, reset, or just soak up the sun at the beach.
Right.
I have to be honest, looking at this from the outside, it sounds like straight-up workplace fraud. You are actively lying to your employer.
Technically, yes.
So how does a culture not only tolerate this, but celebrate it to the point of giving it a catchy name?
To understand the tolerance for chucking a sickie, you really have to examine the linguistic mechanics of the diminutive. Australian slang is famous for taking standard words and adding in an E or an O to the end of them.
Like brekkie for breakfast or arvo for afternoon.
Exactly. And what that does is it physically softens the consonants in your mouth. It weaponizes cuteness.
Weaponized cuteness.
Yeah, because technically, fraudulent absenteeism is a harsh adult corporate violation. But by branding it as a sickie, a word that literally sounds like a toddler complaining about a tummy ache, the culture strips the corporate guilt and the venom away from the action.
That is a brilliant psychological trick. It reframes a fireable offense into a harmless, cheeky misdemeanor.
And uttered jokingly, it turns a sneaky situation lighthearted. It's widely understood by both employees and employers as an unwritten pressure release valve. It prevents absolute burnout in a society that simply refuses to let corporate demands completely dictate human life.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that exact same psychological trick, removing the venom from bad behavior, applies to the concept of deception itself. We see this with the phrase, pulling a Swiftie.
Pulling a Swiftie. I love this one. It describes doing something deceptively or cleverly to your own advantage.
Like harmlessly bending the rules.
Right. If a tricky salesman slightly overcharges you or a friend uses a weird loophole to win a board game, you might say, did you just pull a Swiftie on me?
It sounds so entirely different than saying, did you just defraud me? Or are you cheating?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's about admiring the sleight of hand rather than condemning the malice. When you accuse someone of pulling a Swiftie, you are acknowledging the deception, but you're doing it with a wink.
It's the linguistic equivalent of watching a street magician pick your pocket, or like executing a clever life hack. You might be missing your watch, but you just have to tip your hat to the cleverness of the trick.
It demonstrates a remarkable social elasticity. A rigid culture snaps when rules are broken, but an elastic culture just laughs, calls it a Swiftie, and moves on.
That choice to dramatize life with a sense of self-aware humor rather than rigid anxiety is exactly what allowed this hyper-regional attitude to successfully export itself to the rest of the planet.
And it culminated in one specific word that acts as the ultimate ambassador for Australian culture.
Our final term, the climax of surprise.
Crake.
It's an exclamation of surprise, excitement, or pure amazement, and it is impossible to hear that word and not immediately picture the late wildlife expert Steve Irwin.
The crocodile hunter.
Yes. Wrestling an apex predator in a swamp while shouting it at the camera. Don't you feel like yelling crikey immediately makes you feel like you're wrestling a wild reptile, even if the reality is you just stubbed your toe on the living room sofa?
Oh, absolutely. And that's exactly what Irwin did. He essentially took a piece of local conversational punctuation and turned it into a massive global phenomenon.
He really did.
He bridged the gap between a very specific regional personality and international pop culture.
But the true magic of crikey isn't found in the outback, right? It's found in the living room. Because the source specifically notes it's used for everyday surprises, not just crocodiles.
Right, we aren't all out in the bush wrangling venomous snakes.
Thank goodness.
The beauty of this slang is how it scales to everyday life. You don't need a crocodile. You can literally yell, crikey, because you just dropped your keys or, like you said, stubbed your toe.
It immediately changes the narrative of the moment. You aren't just a clumsy person who bumped their foot. You are a rugged explorer who just encountered an unexpected hazard in the domestic wilderness.
Yelling crikey dramatizes the mundane in a way that is inherently joyful. And that is the ultimate function of all these terms. They aren't just vocabulary, they're tools for reframing reality.
So what does this all mean? We started out today trying to understand how a few cheeky shortened phrases completely transform everyday language, and we found a masterclass in human psychology.
We really did.
We saw how going acts as linguistic WD-40 to eliminate social friction. We learned how having a yarn forces us to step off the transactional treadmill.
And we explored how hard yakka democratizes grueling effort, while Goodnian leverages tall poppy syndrome to keep egos in check.
Exactly. We unpacked the weaponized cuteness of chucking a sickie and the harmless sleight of hand in pulling a Swiftie. And finally, we saw how crikey turns a stubbed toe into an actual adventure. Integrating even one of these into your vocabulary can make your daily chat so much warmer and far less rigid.
This raises an important question, though, about the structural rigidity of our own conversations. Integrating the philosophy behind these words, the willingness to lower the stakes, to praise without pedestals, and to forgive minor rebellions, can make any daily interaction vastly more authentic.
It proves that language doesn't have to be a test you pass. It can just be a tool you use to make the people around you feel more comfortable.
Exactly.
We just saw how Australian slang acts as a mirror for their laid-back, hardworking, yet totally rebellious culture. So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today. Take a moment to think about the slang you use in your own hometown or, your specific profession. What do those specific shortened words secretly reveal about what your culture values most? Do they invite connection or do they build walls? And how might they sound to a total outsider?